Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 3 of Legends of Tomorrow called Blood Ties. And now that we've got all the, as they say sometimes in Hollywood, pipe laying out of the way from the two-part pilot episode, now we can kind of really start getting into the story. And in general, the show is still finding its feet. I know I've said repeatedly in my reviews, it always takes a show 3 or 4 episodes, sometimes 5 or 6, to really find its groove. Now, this show is only, if I remember correctly, supposed to be about 16 episodes, so yeah, it might take a little bit longer simply because the pilot was more or less a two-parter. But again, the show is still finding its feet, but we're starting to get there. So let's kind of get right things down. Let's just start getting things through. Nothing really particular to say about Kendra this episode. Now, her having that weird connection to Carter's body is really interesting, and I do like that they're continuing to play up the whole. I guess you could might as well just say mysticism of it all, like her doing that weird chanting and stuff. I mean, that's kind of cool. Also, kind of the whole. This, of course, leads to the whole plot with the Adam and Martin Stein working together, Adam going into her body and all of that. I mean, it's all very reminiscent of the famous film from the '60s, Fantastic Voyage, which I have seen, but it was like years and years ago. But I do remember liking it. It is that was actually a really good movie, and it was obviously a product of the '60s. But I remember watching it on TV as a teenager, and it was like, this holds up reasonably pretty well for a movie from the '60s. Um, and definitely hard not to get a kick out of Ray Palmer mentioning the old school video game Asteroids. And I really did like him, sort of flying around inside of Kendra's body because again, this is another thing that they've often had the Atom do. I mean, he's actually had to do that. I remember one story I read where he actually had to do that into to the Joker, and he got inside of the Joker's mind and even saw what possibly were some flashbacks from the Joker's life before he became the Joker and was freaked the hell out because that's the great thing about the Joker is like even super people with superpowers who are like in the Justice League are creeped the hell out by this guy even though he's just a dude. But anyway, there was actually another really cool one where I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been DC. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was DC 1 Million story, where he went inside of Barbara Gordon's body, Oracle, to help fight this nanovirus thing. And she said to him when he showed up, like she was a member of the Justice League, but she's like, I don't normally let people see my face, and he's just like, look, when I'm this size, everybody's faces tends to look like moons to me, so I can't really like make out enough of your face to really be able to tell anything about what you really look like. And they're talking on the radio while he's swimming through her body, destroying this nanotech, and the Atom starts flirting with her, and she's a little bit weirded out by this, and he goes. Like it's kind of weird having somebody flirt with me while they're flying around inside of my body. And he goes, "Oh, sorry, I'm from a college town. I can't help but flirt with girls with glasses." And I absolutely, for some reason, loved that line. That just seemed like such a perfect encapsulation of Ray Palmer in that moment. But anywho, um, the whole thing with Ray kind of having that crisis of confidence and Martin Stein pretending like, oh yeah, I just pretended not to remember who you were because I was jealous. That felt really kind of boring and cliche. And then I love how they turned around and Stein was like, "No, I was lying. I totally don't remember who you were. I've had so many exceptional students. There's no way I'm going to remember them all. I just did that to make you feel better." And I'm like, like man, Stein, you're a dick, but you're at your heart, you're a good dude. And I did like how Ray sort of started opening up to Stein a little bit about his past. I mean, this goes back to what we learned about his fiance who died when Deathstroke's crew were terrorizing Starling City at the time. Still called Starling City at the time. So that's cool. And I do like that these two guys, even though there is that kind of conflict between them, they are starting to bond because in a lot of ways, Stein and Ray are very similar people. Ray's just a little bit more humble about it all. But it's hard not to just kind of want that sort of guidance from a mentor figure like Stein, especially for somebody like Ray, who's already had Stein as a bit of a mentor, even if Stein doesn't remember. Let's see. So let's see. Oh yeah, Jax. Nothing really huge to say about him. I just sort of like how he's takes that stance with Heatwave and Captain Cold, but it doesn't. It takes surprisingly little for them to kind of convince him to like, yeah, go on. Let's have you be the getaway man in our jewel heist. And it all turns out to be just because like he just wants to fool around with Rip Hunter's this like neat little toy on the ship. Now, in all fairness, though, like starting a fight with those two guys in that situation probably would have ended pretty badly for Jax. They probably would have just knocked him out and thrown him out. At least thrown him out of the ship. But at least this way he was a part of the situation and can maybe have had some kind of an impact. But it still sort of feels like he went along with what they were planning to do a little too easily, I should say. Gotta make sure you're using those adverbs properly, folks. Free tip, if a word ends in ly, pretty good chance it's an adverb. Okay, grammar lesson over. Now, I do like that they're kind of continuing to flesh out Mick as a character. Just these little things that he does and says. And it was pretty hilarious to hear him reference Eyes Wide Shut at the when they busted in on Vandal Savage's little soiree. Um, Especially hilarious if you understand what he was talking about in reference to what was some of the freaky stuff that went on in Eyes Wide Shut. But yeah, the real star though of that bit of it was all Snart, and it's interesting that we see Snart as a child in 1975. He looks to me like maybe 7 or 8 years old. I'm pretty bad at pegging the ages of young children, but that seems to be about right. So what's interesting though is that means that Snart's actually several years older than I would have had him figured as being. And in fact, just to kind of check on this, I went and looked up when Wentworth Miller was born. He was born in 1972. So Snart's probably about 5 years older than Wentworth Miller is in real life. Um, Captain Cold is obviously a guy who takes care of himself physically, and he can just be one of those people who simply looks younger than they really are. A lot of people tell me that I look younger than I really am. How old am I? I don't like to talk about that. It depresses me. But let's just say that I'm probably older than most people would get the impression that I am. When I do tell people how old I am, they're usually pretty surprised. Of course, one thing I've noticed about people like that is that often overnight, one day, time catches up with them, and people go and start looking old like that. Not looking forward to that day. Not looking forward to that day at all. Looking at my older relatives. Time will take its toll. Then again, most of my older relatives spend a lot of time, as in decades, smoking heavily. And yeah, so I guess I should consider myself lucky that my worst vices are that I like fried foods and don't like exercise. At least I'm trying something with the fried foods, because F exercise. Oh God, I'm gonna die of a heart attack one day. I'm gonna die right on my floor. I can feel it. Well, that'll go sometime. Anyway, so Snart does try to change the past. I'm a little bit annoyed about how many people were freaking out. Like, is that Emerald Kryptonite? Like, no, you dumbasses. Okay, they can't really have direct Superman stuff on this show. I mean, yeah, they did use the words Men of Steel, but again, and even if it is, so what? We're never going to be able to have Superman on this show. Which is kind of a funny thing to say, seeing as how they just announced that The Flash is going to be guest starring on Supergirl, but them's the breaks. What gets me though is that in the original timeline, Snart's dad tried to steal the emerald and was caught. In the new timeline, he's caught trying to sell the emerald to an undercover cop. That means he should have been convicted of both attempting to sell stolen property and the theft in general, and yet he still only got 5 years in both situations. So even though he was almost certainly convicted of more crimes than he was originally convicted of in the first timeline, he still gets only 5 years in prison. I guess Lewis Snart must have gotten himself a really good lawyer. So yeah, I have to say that seems like a little bit of sloppy writing on the writer's part, but the whole pathos there with Captain Cold, especially when he goes into his old childhood home, sees his old toys as a kid, and that really great moment where he talks to himself as a young kid. I mean, man, that was some heartbreaking stuff. And if you've ever had a moment like when you're as an adult, you're messing around and you happen to like say, for example, come across some of your old toys from when you were a kid. I mean, there's just something about that really kind of can't help but jab a little bit of a. It gets you right here. Like I still have a kid. Like when I was a kid, I kept all of my favorite toys in this little kitty suitcase. I still have that. All of my favorite toys from when I was a kid are still in it. They're stashed in my closet right now. It's like, no, man, I love these things, these little bits of plastic to pieces when I was a kid. Over my dead body are these things ever getting thrown away? Now, again, they just sit in my closet and basically collect dust. But every once in a while, I'll take them out and look at them and like, oh man, I remember having so much fun with these things. And the thing that really gets me is when I hold one of them, I'm like, this seems so small now. I remember this being bigger. I remember that it used to take most of my hand to wrap it around this thing, and now it fits in the palm of my hand easily. And that never stops being weird to me. And that whole thing where he talks to his younger self, it reminds me of a story from The Flash, the Wally West days, I believe written by Mark Waid, drawn by the late and sorely missed Mike Waringo, where Wally actually goes back in time, visits a family reunion, and talks to his younger self as a kid. And, kind of just gives him some advice. And Mark Waid said, that whole scene was sort of like, if I could go and talk to my younger self, what I would say to my younger self. And again, you got to give Wentworth Miller. He really give him credit. He really knocked that whole scene about how don't ever let anyone hurt you. I mean, he just knocked that one right out of the park. I mean, a lot of props to that guy. The CW was immensely fortunate to get that guy to come on and be Snart, and it has been paying dividends ever since. And you can tell that Miller really enjoys the character that he's playing. I mean, it's so obvious that he and the fellow that played Heatwave love playing these guys, and it's so fun to see actors who are just having a grand old time with the characters that they get to play. Casper Crump, for example. Oh my God, this guy. I've never heard of this dude. He's some guy from like Denmark. But oh man, just the way he goes out there with Vandal Savage, particularly this episode, I'm just like, damn, dude. I'm not sure if Brian Blessed would be impressed, and perhaps even tell you to dial it down a little bit. Okay, no, he wouldn't. Brian Blessed would never tell anybody to dial it down. But oh man, this guy's performance as Savage this episode, I mean, that was worthy of Brian Blessed. Just the way he's chewing the scenery and hamming it up. I mean, this is a guy who's like, oh man, is he having fun? He is loving it. Um, so yeah, but yeah, kind of popping over to that particular plot line. Is it just me or is Rip Hunter kind of crappy at his job? I mean, he talks about how, like, my specialty is making discrete alterations to the timeline, and yet Sarah's the one who has to say, like, well, why don't you go steal Vandal Savage's money? Well, I hate to break it to you, Rip, but take away the bad guy's money is kind of tactics 101 for dealing with situations like this. I mean, why do you think that law enforcement agencies all over the world spend all these time trying to find these bank accounts for terrorist organizations? And then when they go to the bank, Rip's like, yeah, everything's fine. Sarah's like, hey, idiot, these people are onto us and they're coming to kill us. He's like, no, no, it's fine. And then, oh yeah, it turns out everybody's there trying to kill them. So yeah. Now, granted, Rip's in a little bit of a weird place right now, but still, it's like, dude, how did you get to be a time master if you're this crap at your job? Um, Also, we finally got a clear. I mean, this is what I thought, but that poster in the background, yeah, that's clearly Jonah Hex. I mean, that's kind of what I've suspecting ever since we've seen it there, because well, we know that he's going to turn up on the show. But it's just like this is kind of feels like the first time I've ever been able to get a close enough look at it to feel like 100%. I mean, again, it's been announced that character's coming on the show, but still. And I can't help but wonder if there's any kind of connection to that fact and the fact that Rip Hunter fights with some kind of high-tech six-shooter, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, it was definitely nice to see Sarah go in there and kind of give Rip a kick in the butt to get him to go out there and do something about it. Now, somebody did point out that they're basically going to Leipzig in 1975, and at the time, Leipzig was part of East Germany, which was under communist control. So the idea of a private bank in communist Eastern Europe in the 1970s, that's pretty crazy. But on the other hand, if Vandal Savage's people are running this bank, then yeah, obviously not the normal communist 1970s bank. So I think we kind of need to let that one slide a little. Now, there was one thing this episode where Sarah kind of gets upset and starts yelling about her bloodlust. And the thing is, though, like on the Arrow the last night before, Malcolm Merlin had basically said, like, yeah, John Constantine got rid of Sarah's bloodlust. I'm like, well, that's not quite how I remember it. I remember Constantine restored Sarah's soul so that she wasn't, going around murdering attempted rapists in alleys anymore. But because Sarah's thing was she needed to kill the person who had killed her, which was Thea, and she refused to do that, that was kind of causing the problem. It didn't mean that she got rid of that bloodlust. It just meant that, again, she wasn't a crazy savage animal anymore. So either Malcolm just didn't understand the situation or he was just BSing for whatever reason. But I get the feeling that this is one where Malcolm was just simply mistaken. I get the impression that Malcolm's knowledge of magic is not the strongest. I mean, he obviously knows some stuff about it, but probably not as much as John Constantine. But Sarah's whole, hey, I have this murderous bloodlust and it's killing me, or well, I feel like a monster because of that. Well, I mean, that's cool. I mean, that's kind of something internal for her. Also explains why she's so hepped up on stuff that's going to make her mellow, such as weed. And given what we've seen about how that bloodlust thing has been playing out with Thea on Arrow, so yeah. Um, Now the whole thing with Vandal Savage and this cult, and what they're doing with Hawkman's body, that doesn't ring a bell from anything I've seen in the comics. But I gotta say, it's a pretty cool idea. I do like it. I think it's really quite interesting. And just that they went all through all of these things just to make sure that Carter could be put to rest properly, and get a little payback on Savage. I mean, that's a nice way of bonding the team together and letting Rip Hunter screw up yet again. Because, oh yeah, again, Rip Hunter's terrible at his job. Can't think of the most basic tactics. Doesn't realize when people are on to him. Failed to kill Vandal Savage when he had the chance. Although, again, I do like it's because he's just not really a straight up killer. I mean, that was one I'll kind of let him have a bit of a slide on. And then let's see, what else was it? Something else. Whatever. Yeah, I also kind of thought it was funny that, Rip Hunter tries to kill Savage one time in ancient Egypt, and then Vandal Savage spends like all these thousands of years basically portraying him as this sort of demon that, is a big part of who's hugely tied to him and all this. Oh yeah, he let Rip Hunter let his wife and son's name slip so that Vandal Savage totally knows to kill them, and also Vandal Savage, because of his locket, now knows what they look like. Way to go, Rip. You are truly a terrible time master. Um, yeah. So I think that's everything that I had to say about this episode. Now, the team is going to 1986 next. Pretty down to see that. 80s fashion. Um, yeah, that's going to be interesting. Okay, guys, I think I've rambled enough here, so I'm going to call it. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.